Have you ever wondered about the deep secrets hidden within the stories of the Bible? One of the most intriguing stories is that of Potiphar and Joseph. In the shadowy corridors of ancient Egypt, where the absolute power of Pharaoh ruled everything, Potiphar, a powerful official, held a crucial position as the captain of Pharaoh's bodyguard. But what makes us curious is, was Potiphar truly a eunuch, as some Bible translations suggest? Or is it just a hypothesis that has been built up over time? This story doesn't end here. The secret of Potiphar and Joseph might make you reconsider how power and loyalty were controlled in a brutal ancient society. Let's dive into the details of Joseph's life, from when he was sold into slavery to the challenges he faced in Potiphar's house. In today's video, we will explore strange events, unexpected situations, and profound lessons. So, what do you think about Potiphar and the story behind this character? Do you believe there's a truth hidden behind those rumors? If you find these discoveries intriguing, don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you won't miss our upcoming videos. Together, we will uncover secrets yet to be revealed. Potiphar, a character mentioned in the Bible story from the book of Genesis, was a powerful and influential man in ancient Egypt. He was an official of Pharaoh and held the position of captain of the bodyguard, meaning he occupied a vital role in Egypt's governing system, reflecting his significant influence not only in the military but also in politics. Potiphar played an extremely important role, commanding Pharaoh's bodyguard to protect Egypt's supreme ruler, a task that required absolute loyalty and exceptional military skills. Moreover, he also supervised the imprisonment of national prisoners, including Pharaoh's enemies and anyone considered a threat to the throne. This position made Potiphar one of the most trusted and powerful individuals in Egypt. He had direct access to Pharaoh and participated in the most sensitive affairs of the kingdom. Potiphar's wealth and influence were also reflected in his residence, which was not just a house but a symbol of his status, a common feature for high-ranking officials. Potiphar lived in a luxurious house decorated with the finest Egyptian artifacts of the time. His home, described in the Bible as prosperous under Joseph's management, was a center of power where important decisions were made and where he hosted high-ranking guests. In Genesis 39:1, the Bible introduces Potiphar as follows. Now Joseph had been taken down to Egypt. Potiphar, an Egyptian who was one of Pharaoh's officials, the captain of the guard, bought him from the Ishmaelites who had taken him there. And this is where all the controversy and doubts surrounding Potiphar begin. The term eunuch, used in some traditional Bible translations, refers to men who had been castrated, often before puberty in ancient times, particularly in Eastern cultures. In Egypt, eunuchs were sometimes chosen for important and trusted positions in the royal court. It was believed that those in this condition would be more loyal, having no family ties that could threaten the king's power. Castration was a common practice in many ancient cultures, including Mesopotamia, Persia, and during certain periods of Egyptian history. Eunuchs were often given important roles, such as guardians of the harem, advisors, and administrative officials because of the trust that kings placed in them. Castration was seen as a way to create servants who were incapable of reproduction, thus minimizing the risks of dynastic ambitions. However, castration also carried with it a significant social and personal stigma, as the condition of being a eunuch was often associated with the loss of masculine power and personal authority. In many Bible stories, we can observe traces of castration, which was a strategy of power and control. A prominent example is King Artaxerxes, mentioned in the books of Ezra and Nehemiah, who ruled the Persian Empire firmly throughout his reign. Castration was a common practice to ensure the absolute loyalty of those holding positions near the throne, such as eunuchs serving in the royal palace. This practice not only ensured the loyalty of the king's wives, preventing extramarital relations, but also turned these men into submissive tools in the hands of the king, making them instruments for royal ceremonies and events. During the reign of King Nebuchadnezzar, known for his unrelenting conquests and desire to solidify absolute power, castrating captured prisoners became a widespread and feared practice. This brutal practice was both a physical punishment and a means of subjugating conquered peoples, stripping away their masculinity and thus their ability to resist Babylonian rule. By castrating his enemies, Nebuchadnezzar not only ensured military victory, but also crushed the spirit of entire nations, leaving scars not just on the body, but in the minds of the survivors. The physical pain that prisoners endured became a prolonged form of humiliation and psychological trauma, serving as a psychological weapon that echoed far beyond the battlefield. The fear of castration became a powerful tool of control, capable of intimidating future enemies and ensuring submission even before conflicts began. This ruthless strategy solidified Nebuchadnezzar's power, making him not only a conqueror, but also a symbol of terror and dominance throughout the region. In 587 BC, one of the darkest events in Israel's history took place. When the Babylonian army, under the command of the ruthless King Nebuchadnezzar, besieged and destroyed the city of Jerusalem, ending with the destruction of the temple and the capture of King Zedekiah. Fear spread throughout the city at that time, but in our present-day lives, anxiety and insecurity have not disappeared completely. However, if you believe in Jesus Christ in your heart, you will be saved. Leave an amen in the comments if you always believe that. Returning to Israel, Zedekiah's reign began during a period already filled with challenges. He ascended the throne amidst political instability, with the kingdom of Judah facing an increasing threat from the expansion of Babylon, despite continuous warnings from the prophets urging the people to be cautious and obey God. Zedekiah, feeling cornered, decided to break his alliance with Babylon and seek military assistance from Egypt, a decision that would prove to be a grave mistake. This formation of an alliance with Egypt was seen by Nebuchadnezzar as a direct betrayal, as Zedekiah had ascended the throne as a loyal subject of Babylon. Nebuchadnezzar reacted swiftly and brutally. He mobilized his army and marched toward Jerusalem, determined to punish Zedekiah's rebellion and crush any resistance. The siege of Jerusalem lasted for an extended period and devastated the city, pushing it to the brink of famine and despair. Ultimately, the collapse of Israel was inevitable. In his final moment of desperation, Zedekiah attempted to flee the city under the cover of darkness with a small group. However, the escape proved futile. The Babylonian army captured Zedekiah on the plains of Jericho and immediately brought him before Nebuchadnezzar to face the consequences of his disobedience. In a rage over the betrayal, and also to set an example for those who refused to obey, Nebuchadnezzar subjected Zedekiah to a harsh trial, where his sentence was decided with ruthless calculation. The Babylonian king ordered the execution of Zedekiah's sons right before his eyes. This act not only caused unspeakable pain to Zedekiah as he witnessed the extinction of his bloodline, but also served to ensure that no member of the house of David would survive to challenge Babylon's rule in the future. But the punishment didn't stop there. After his sons were executed, Zedekiah endured a final, horrific punishment. His eyes were gouged out. This punishment represented his complete helplessness and humiliation. Blinded and broken, Zedekiah was taken as a prisoner to Babylon, where he spent the rest of his days in captivity, bearing not only the scars of his body, but also the weight of responsibility for the downfall of his people. This pivotal moment in biblical history underscores the brutality of Nebuchadnezzar and the uncompromising reality of Babylonian imperial power, which tolerated no betrayal and used castration as a tool to secure its dominance and spread fear. Those who dared to challenge its authority would be punished. However, today's video focuses on the peculiar case of Potiphar and Joseph. Joseph was the 11th son of Jacob, also known as Israel, and the firstborn of his beloved wife Rachel. From a young age, Joseph stood out among his brothers, not only because he was his father's favored son, but also because of his prophetic dreams, which hinted at a future where he would be the one in charge of his family. Jacob did not hide his special affection for Joseph. He gave him a richly ornamented coat, a gift that symbolized not only his father's unique love, but also a significant position in the family. This coat also marked a clear distinction between the sons, sparking jealousy and hatred among Joseph's brothers, who felt abandoned and filled with anger. The situation worsened when Joseph began sharing his dreams. He told his brothers, "I had a dream we were binding sheaves of grain in the field. My sheaf stood upright, while your sheaves gathered around mine and bowed down to it." Shortly after, Joseph had another dream. He said, "I saw the sun, the moon, and 11 stars bowing down to me." These dreams were understood as signs that Joseph, the youngest of the brothers, would one day rule over them, further intensifying the hatred his brothers felt toward him. Unable to bear the thought of submitting to Joseph, his brothers conspired against him. One day, they took their flocks to graze in a field a little farther away, and Jacob sent Joseph to check on them and see if all was well with the brothers and the flocks. When they saw Joseph approaching from a distance, wearing his colorful coat, his brothers began to plot together. "This is our chance. Let's kill him and throw him into one of the cisterns here, and then tell our father that a wild animal has devoured him." However, Reuben, the eldest brother who had a kind heart, said, "We don't need to shed any blood. Let's throw him into this cistern and leave him there." All the brothers agreed to this plan, unaware that Reuben intended to return later, after the others had gone, to rescue Joseph and bring him back to their father. When Joseph approached, his brothers immediately attacked him and stripped off the colorful coat that Jacob had made for him. Then they threw Joseph into the cistern, left him there, and sat down to eat their meal casually. As evening approached, a caravan of Ishmaelite traders passed by. They were on their way to Egypt with camels loaded with spices, balm, and myrrh. While Reuben was away, Judah saw them and said, "Why don't we sell Joseph to them as a slave? That way, we can get rid of him without killing him." So, they decided to sell Joseph to the caravan for 20 shekels of silver. This journey to Egypt, filled with fear and uncertainty, took Joseph far from his homeland and family, thrusting him into an uncertain future. Meanwhile, to cover up their crime, Joseph's brothers killed a goat, took its blood, and dipped Joseph's beautiful coat in it. They brought the coat back to their father, Jacob, and when he saw the blood-stained coat, he was horrified. He cried out, "This is Joseph's coat. My beloved son has been devoured by a wild animal." Jacob mourned deeply in unbearable grief, and no one could comfort him. From that moment, Joseph's life took a new turn. What challenges await him in the future? If you're interested and want to learn more, don't hesitate to subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications, and join us as we explore this video further. It was here that Joseph was taken in by Potiphar, a high-ranking eunuch in Pharaoh's court. From the moment Joseph entered Potiphar's house, the Bible emphasizes that God was always with Joseph, and everything he did was guided by him. In Genesis 39 verse 2, the Bible says, "The Lord was with Joseph, and he became a successful man." God turned difficult circumstances into opportunities for Joseph to display his talents and character. When Joseph entered Potiphar's house, he was not just a slave, he became the manager of Potiphar's estate. God granted Joseph extraordinary wisdom, and Potiphar's household prospered under his management. So much so that Potiphar, recognizing Joseph's exceptional abilities, entrusted him with managing the entire household and all his possessions. What about you? Can you imagine yourself in Joseph's position, from the lowest place becoming the steward of your master's most valuable possessions? Perhaps God is telling you that no matter where you are, no matter your circumstances, He can lift you up and give you opportunities you never expected. But what happens when Joseph's success attracts unwanted attention? Potiphar's wife, a powerful woman, became captivated by Joseph's appearance and integrity. She relentlessly sought to seduce him, and one day, when no one else was in the house, she took her chance. Yet despite the attack, Joseph remained firm in his refusal. He said, "How then can I do this great wickedness and sin against God?" Genesis 39:9. What a powerful statement, right? Joseph not only preserved his own integrity, but also respected the trust his master had placed in him and honored God's justice. If you were in Joseph's shoes, what would you do? Could you stand firm against such temptation? And then, in a defining moment, when Potiphar's wife attempted to force Joseph into wrongdoing, Joseph did not hesitate, but ran away, leaving his cloak in her hands. It was a courageous act, not just because he wanted to avoid sin, but because he understood that, even when things might seem unfair, he had to remain loyal to God. This makes me think about those times in life when we face difficult and sometimes unjust situations. What would you do when you have to choose between what's right and what's wrong, between loyalty and betrayal? But the story doesn't end there. In her anger and shame from being rejected, Potiphar's wife falsely accused Joseph of a crime he didn't commit. She shouted that Joseph had attempted to assault her, and the cloak Joseph left behind became evidence for her accusation. When Potiphar heard his wife's words and saw the cloak, he became furious. However, what's interesting is that Potiphar did not sentence Joseph to death, but instead threw him into the royal prison. This shows that although Joseph was falsely accused, Potiphar still trusted his character and did not rush to judgment. Isn't it true that sometimes in life, we too need patience and to listen to both sides before making a judgment? When Joseph was imprisoned, perhaps he felt abandoned, but the Bible says, "The Lord was with Joseph." Genesis 39 verse 21. While many might have thought Joseph would easily give up his faith and hope, it was in that dark prison that he became the manager of the prisoners, bringing order and purpose to everything. Joseph was not just a skilled manager, he was a model of perseverance, faith, and loyalty. No matter the challenges, God remained with Joseph. Are you feeling like you're going through a tough time in life? Remember, God will never forsake you, and He will always guide you on the right path, no matter how difficult that path may seem. Keep trusting, persevere, and walk with God. With his character and management skills, Joseph earned the trust of the warden, who assigned him the responsibility of taking care of the other prisoners and overseeing the activities in the prison. Just like in Potiphar's house, everything under Joseph's management was orderly, even in the bleak conditions of imprisonment. The story of Joseph then leads us to a pivotal moment in his life, when he went from a forgotten prisoner to someone who would rise to great power. But before we delve into that transformation, let's revisit the moment when Joseph met Pharaoh's two officials in prison. This story is not just a dramatic part of the Bible, but also a testament to patience and trust in God's guidance. Even though Joseph had been left in prison for so long and seemed to have no way out, he kept his faith strong in God. One day, when he met two new friends, Pharaoh's chief cupbearer and chief baker, Joseph didn't just notice their plight, but was willing to share his faith in God's revelations. Have you ever felt like you were in a lonely place, as if no one cared for you? But it is in those moments that God may lead us to unexpected opportunities to help and bring clarity to things that others cannot understand. When these two men shared their dreams with him, Joseph immediately recognized that this was his chance to show that only God could interpret dreams. In Genesis 48, Joseph said, "Do not interpretations belong to God? Tell me your dreams." This shows us that even though Joseph had the ability to interpret dreams, he never became complacent. He remained humble and acknowledged that everything came from God. What can we learn from this humility? We can be talented and successful, but we should never forget that all good things come from God. The cupbearer's dream was one of hope, about a vine with 3 branches from which he made wine for Pharaoh. Joseph explained that these 3 branches symbolized 3 days, and in 3 days he would be restored to his position and return to serve Pharaoh as before. Joseph asked the cupbearer to remember him when he was freed and to plead with Pharaoh on his behalf, telling him about his circumstances. However, Joseph's joy didn't last long when the chief baker shared his dream. His dream had 3 baskets of bread on his head, with birds eating the bread from the top basket. Joseph sadly explained that the 3 baskets also symbolized 3 days, but the outcome would be different. The baker would be hanged, and the birds would eat his flesh. This reminds me of a big question in life. Why are some people freed while others face a worse fate? The truth is, sometimes we can't understand the reasons behind events, but like Joseph, we need to trust in God's fairness, no matter the outcome. 3 days later, everything Joseph had said came true. The cupbearer was restored to his position and the baker was executed. However, as we see in the Bible, the cupbearer forgot his promise. He did not remember Joseph, causing Joseph to remain in prison for 2 more years. This is a crucial part of the story. Even when we do good and remain honest, we don't always receive immediate rewards. But one thing Joseph did very well was not giving up his faith. Have you ever felt forgotten when your efforts went unrecognized? Don't forget that in those moments, God is still by your side and has a wonderful plan for you. Finally, one day, Pharaoh had 2 strange dreams that no one in his court could interpret. At this moment, the cupbearer remembered Joseph and told Pharaoh about the Hebrew man who had interpreted his dream while they were both in prison. Pharaoh summoned Joseph. This was a major turning point in Joseph's life, from an unknown prisoner to someone with a great opportunity. When Pharaoh asked about his dream, Joseph humbly said, "Interpreting dreams is not for me, but God will give Pharaoh the answer." This is an important lesson about humility and trusting in God's power in our lives. Joseph explained that Pharaoh's dream revealed that there would be 7 years of abundance, followed by 7 years of severe famine. Not only did Joseph interpret the dream, but he also proposed a strategy to deal with the crisis, to store food during the 7 years of abundance in preparation for the famine. Pharaoh was deeply impressed by Joseph's wisdom and discernment and appointed him as the governor of Egypt, giving him authority to manage the country and implement the plan. Joseph's life changed completely from this point. From a forgotten prisoner, he became the most powerful man in Egypt, second only to Pharaoh. Joseph was given the Egyptian name Zaphenath-Paneah and married Asenath, the daughter of Potiphar, priest of On. This marriage helped solidify Joseph's position in Egyptian society, elevating him into the elite class and clarifying his powerful status. Joseph's story is a clear testament that even in difficult circumstances, if we persevere and trust in God, He will lift us up at the right moment. Have you ever gone through challenges that, looking back, you realized were stepping stones to better things? Always remember that, even if you feel like Joseph in the prison right now, God has a wonderful plan for you. Just be patient and keep walking in faith. Like Joseph, the challenges we face often don't reveal their true meaning until we look back from a different perspective. However, as Joseph's story unfolds, there are some misunderstandings and misinterpretations concerning the characters in his life. One common misconception is about Potiphar. Over time, some incorrect ideas have arisen, claiming that Potiphar was a eunuch who changed his gender and was later named Potiphar. However, this explanation, although circulated in some teachings, has no basis in the Bible and results from a confusion between 2 different characters. Such misunderstandings can lead to distorted interpretations of the biblical characters. The Bible never mentions that Potiphar, the Egyptian officer who bought Joseph as a slave, changed his gender or name. A misinterpretation like this might come from confusion or a lack of attention to the context and distinction between different characters in the Bible. It is important to emphasize that Potiphar and Potiphar are 2 completely separate individuals. In fact, these are 2 entirely different figures in the biblical story. Potiphar, mentioned in Genesis 39, is the captain of Pharaoh's bodyguard who bought Joseph and made him his steward. He plays a significant role in Joseph's early life in Egypt, but his story is unrelated to Potiphar, apart from the coincidence of their names. Potiphar, who is introduced in Genesis 41:45. Pharaoh gave Joseph the name Zaphenath-Paneah and gave him Asenath, daughter of Potiphar, priest of On, to be his wife, and Joseph went throughout the land of Egypt. The confusion between these 2 names could lead to misunderstandings, but it is important to understand that Potiphar and Potiphar played different roles in Joseph's story and are not the same person. The question of whether Potiphar was castrated or whether he was a eunuch is a controversial issue. There is no direct evidence in the Bible that supports this. In fact, the Bible story focuses more on his position of power and his relationship with Joseph than on details about his physical condition. You may have heard the term eunuch and wondered if Potiphar was a eunuch. Some opinions suggest that Potiphar may have been a eunuch, and this idea has become part of the interpretation of his character. However, according to the Bible, the term used in Genesis 39 verse 1 to describe Potiphar is saris in Hebrew. This term is often translated as official or eunuch, but that does not mean Potiphar was necessarily castrated. As you can see, the word saris in Hebrew can have multiple meanings depending on the context. In the ancient world, especially in Egyptian society, saris did not necessarily refer to a man who had been castrated. In fact, in many cultures, this term could refer to high-ranking officials in the royal court, individuals who held very important and trustworthy duties. In the case of Potiphar, he is described as a respected official of Pharaoh, who managed Pharaoh's household and possessions excellently. So why is there this confusion? The answer may lie in the different interpretations and understandings over the centuries. In many later versions of the Bible, some translators chose not to translate the term saris as eunuch, but simply as official to avoid unnecessary misunderstandings. In this way, we can focus on what the Bible truly emphasizes about Potiphar, a powerful man with high responsibilities in Pharaoh's court, not on the details of his physical condition. This becomes even clearer when we look at the relationship between Potiphar and his wife. In ancient Egyptian society, eunuchs were often not allowed to marry or maintain family relationships. Therefore, the fact that Potiphar had a wife and that she attempted to seduce Joseph casts doubt on the theory that he was a eunuch. Furthermore, a figure like Potiphar, who held a high position in society and was trusted to the point of entrusting his entire household and assets to Joseph, certainly could not have been a eunuch, as this would contradict the cultural and social norms of that time. Thus, through the explanation of this detail, we can see that the Bible does not focus on clarifying the details of Potiphar's physical condition or gender. What is more important is that the Bible wants us to focus on Potiphar's character and role in Joseph's story. Potiphar was a man of power, trusted by Pharaoh, and had significant responsibilities in society. This highlights Joseph's integrity, as he was the only one Potiphar trusted to manage everything, even in the most challenging circumstances. So, in Joseph's journey, from being sold into slavery as a young brother to being imprisoned and ultimately rising to the position of governor of Egypt, we see God's presence in every situation. Although Joseph had to go through continuous trials, he always maintained his faith and trusted in God's guidance. And as you can notice, Joseph's story is also a reminder for us. No matter how difficult life may be, or how much we may be misunderstood or face hardships, if we persevere and place our trust in God, He will always guide us to something good. Finally, we must remember that when interpreting the Bible, we should not impose modern ideas onto ancient stories, as this can distort the message the Bible is trying to convey. In John 8:12, when Jesus spoke again to the people, he said, "I am the light of the world. Whoever follows me will never walk in darkness, but will have the light of life." Let the light of God lead us through every challenge and difficulty. And always remember that He is the one who guides us to good things. Returning to Potiphar, although he played an important role in Joseph's story by being the official who bought Joseph and brought him into his house, he disappears from the biblical narrative after the false accusations made by Potiphar's wife. As for Joseph, his new responsibility as governor was immense. He was tasked with overseeing Egypt's preparations for the 7 years of famine that would follow the 7 years of plenty, as he had predicted. Pharaoh's dreams, combined with Joseph's wisdom and managerial abilities, led to a plan to store grain during the years of abundance. Under his leadership, Egypt harvested and stored a large quantity of food, filling warehouses in cities and ensuring there would be enough supplies to face the upcoming years of hardship. During these 7 years of abundance, Joseph had 2 sons with Asenath. The first son was Manasseh, which means, "God has made me forget all my hardship and my father's house," symbolizing healing and deliverance from past wounds. The second son was Ephraim, which means, "God has made me fruitful in the land of my suffering," reflecting the prosperity Joseph experienced even in a foreign land. When the 7 years of famine finally arrived, the crisis became severe, not only in Egypt, but also in surrounding lands. Thanks to Joseph's wisdom, Egypt was well prepared, and he began distributing the stored food to the people, selling it in exchange for silver. As the famine spread, other nations began seeking help from Egypt, and Joseph became the savior of his time. Among those who came to Egypt to buy grain were Joseph's brothers. After years of suffering and famine, Joseph's brothers, the ones who had sold him into Egypt, were forced to go there to buy grain. However, when they met Joseph, they did not recognize him. Why was that? Because Joseph was now a powerful man, dressed in Egyptian noble attire, speaking Egyptian, and even communicating through an interpreter. But on the other hand, Joseph immediately recognized his brothers. This situation might seem a bit awkward, wouldn't it? Even though they were his blood brothers, time and circumstances had changed everything. Although Joseph's heart was filled with complex emotions, he did not immediately reveal his identity. Instead, he decided to test his brothers. He accused them of being spies, and anyone can sense the tension in the air when Joseph threatened to keep Simeon as a hostage and demanded they bring their younger brother Benjamin to prove their honesty. Joseph's perspective at this moment was perhaps a combination of suffering and patience. He wanted to know if his brothers had changed since the time he was sold. Can you imagine how his brothers must have felt at that moment? They were accused of being spies, and although they were somewhat confused and frightened, they decided to return to Egypt with Benjamin. This situation might make anyone reflect, would I have the courage to return and face my past? And when they returned, something interesting happened. Joseph threw a banquet for them. The question is, why would Joseph do that? Was it to show hospitality, or was there something deeper at play? After the feast, Joseph once again tested his brothers. He secretly placed a silver cup in Benjamin's sack and then accused them of stealing. Can you imagine the tension at that moment? Everything was now reaching a climax, and Joseph, as the one in power, threatened to keep Benjamin as a slave. But then, a miracle happened. At this moment, Judah, the brother who had once suggested selling Joseph, stood up and begged Joseph to take him as a slave in place of Benjamin. A man who had once been part of a wrong action now sacrificed himself for his brother. This was a touching moment because Judah not only loved Benjamin, but also wanted to protect their father, Jacob. This makes you ask yourself, could I sacrifice myself for someone else like that? And at that very moment, Joseph could no longer contain his emotions. He wept and finally revealed his true identity. Joseph's brothers stood there, stunned, unable to believe their eyes. Joseph embraced them and forgave all that they had done. God had used their wrong actions to bring about something good, to save many lives during the Great Famine. You intended to harm me, but God intended it for good. Genesis 50:20. Let's pause for a moment and reflect. Have you ever encountered people who hurt you in the past and you felt you could never forgive them? But could we learn from Joseph to see difficult situations as opportunities for God to work and eventually look at everything with a heart of forgiveness? When Jacob heard that Joseph was alive, he couldn't believe his ears. After so many years of thinking his son was dead, he was now told that not only was Joseph alive, but he was also a powerful figure in Egypt. Imagine Jacob's emotions in that moment: joy, astonishment, and so many mixed feelings. He decided to move the whole family to Egypt, where Joseph and Pharaoh warmly welcomed them. They were given land in the region of Goshen, one of the best areas in Egypt, where they were not only provided with ample food, but also had the opportunity to grow and prosper. This story is not just a family tale, but also a lesson on forgiveness, sacrifice, and God's great plan. God never abandons us, even when we face our greatest challenges. As Joseph told his brothers, "You intended to harm me, but God intended it for good." Genesis 50:20. Thank you for following the captivating story of Potiphar and Joseph. Through the hidden secrets in the pages of the Bible, we have discovered not just power, but also the loyalty and extraordinary character of Joseph. This story is not only a lesson in perseverance and faith, but also a testament to God's presence with us, even in the darkest times. What do you think about Potiphar and the doubts surrounding his role? Was he really a eunuch, or is it just a misunderstanding? This question remains open, and we would love to hear your thoughts in the comments below this video. Share your reflections on this story and the lessons you've learned. If you want to continue the journey with us to explore the mysteries in the Bible, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you won't miss our latest videos. Let's explore more mysterious, powerful stories and life lessons that the Bible has to offer. Thank you for joining us in today's video. We wish you a wonderful day, and we hope to see you in the next videos. Remember, there are still many secrets in the Bible yet to be revealed, and together we will uncover them all.